Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the podcast today. As a reminder, here on The Pursuit, it is our mission, it's our purpose. We exist to continue to facilitate your journey in the pursuit of God and ultimately all of the potential, that hidden treasure that has been placed within who you are. And today we're honored that you would join with us. We would ask that you take the time, if your life is enriched by these podcasts, that you would share them with other people that you think would be benefited by them. Today on the podcast, we're privileged to be joined by Dr. Eugene Wilson. He's a prolific writer. He is a sought-after speaker. He is invested in equipping leaders and equipping the local assembly, but then even just enriching people's lives so that they truly become everything that God has intended for them. But he has 9 published books. He is currently in the midst of other projects that he's working on. But today, we are privileged to have Eugene Wilson, as I refer to, the good doctor, in the studio today. And so, Brother Wilson, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for coming and being with us.
What a delight. What a delight. It's cold outside, though. It's extremely cold. For a Texas boy.
It's extremely cold.
It's extremely cold for a Texas boy. I grew up in Indiana, so I was raised in the cold, raised in the snow, worked outside in downtown, basically in Indianapolis. Part of it was downtown, but at the north side of Indianapolis. Worked outside for a couple of winters where we blow the snow off when we keep on building. Poured concrete when it was 4 degrees above zero. Wind chill well below zero. The only people in the city of Indianapolis to pour concrete. Of course, down south, everyone will ask, "Why did you pour concrete? It was so cold." Well, you put antifreeze in the concrete. So anyway, I moved south and farther south. And I kept saying, if it snows here, I'm going farther south. So I ended up in Houston. Then I said, if it snows, I'm getting a raft. I'll be floating in the middle of Mexico, Gulf of Mexico. So now I'm in Lufkin at the Texas Bible College, and so I'm having fun. Glad to be here, though.
Man, we're really excited that you're here. So your and I's relationship, we were talking just a minute ago about
prophetic.
Well, I would say
not pathetic.
Yeah, that's right. Well. There's some days that it might delve into the pathetic, but thank God for our wives, so we get back on course. But really, this is a relationship that many would say was a chance encounter. You had come to minister at an event that was being hosted at our church, but not hosted by me as the local pastor. And as a result of that meeting, I got saddled with babysitting you, it seemed like.
If I remember correctly, you made a statement along the lines you really didn't want to be there.
There might have been something along that line. But here again, just, I'm pretty frank, I'm pretty transparent. It's in those moments that I think our ignorance is shown, because we had missed something, and God has truly enriched my life, but you have been a tremendous blessing to the assembly that I get to pastor. And so you came for something entirely different, and now here today I have this friendship. And
God is so cool. And what's really neat, too, is that this church impacted my life at 20 years old. 1920, I came through with Jackson College of Ministries.
I want you to hear what he said. In 1920.
19 or 20 years old. I came through with the chorale from JCM, stayed with a couple. They were newly in church. In fact, the husband had just gotten out of prison like 6 months prior. And we went over to their house, and they had multiple family members. They were a Hispanic family. There must have been 30 people in the little 2-bedroom apartment. And we took the little boy, little girl, we took their room. Robbie Mitchell was the other minister, or my colleague that was with me. He pastors now out in Colorado. And we stayed there. And man, it so moved us. The whole church, the experience moved us deeply. I'll never forget it. And I walked away from that moment saying that this church right here was the greatest church I'd ever been a part of. And that was just for one service. You know, it was so impactful. And then they had the privilege to come back years later and be able to speak here at the midwinter, and then come back last year, and then again this year. I mean, hopefully we've got a pattern going on
We
here.
got something working.
Except it's cold. Can we do this like a little earlier in the year?
Yeah, I actually, so what most of you won't know about him is he loves to fly fish.
Yes.
And so, you know, we're not the great West where we have lots of those opportunities, but we do have some of them here.
Oh, my.
And you could come in the spring and we could hit the salmon runs.
Oh,
You know, that'd be a good time.
I feel something right now. Yes. I hear the Lord speaking.
That's right. So today, just to kind of bring maybe a little more insight for our subscribers, talk to us about your faith journey and kind of where you began and now where you are currently today. You know, you are somebody that most certainly you're a voice in our fellowship, and you're a voice to many ministers. You know, God has gifted you with insight and things that you're sharing. You know, I'll just go on record as saying this is a man who is a leader of leaders, and truly, in some facet, could really be somebody like David K. Bernard. You know, he could be the general superintendent of the United Pentecostal Church. I'll throw that out there. I'm not afraid to say that because of the things that God has put in you, and now you're able to share. But that just don't happen. That's not a light switch that gets flipped on, and all of a sudden one day it's that. So share what you think might be beneficial.
Yeah. So first of all, I was born into a minister's family, and on my mom's side of the family, there are a lot of ministers. On my dad's side of the family, my dad is a first generation apostolic Pentecostal. He became a pastor. His brother, sister married a pastor. The list goes on. Between my wife and I, my wife's got a lot of ministers on her family. I think we have, last time we counted, we're like 38 or so.
Wow.
Ministers in our family and extended family. So that's kind of the heritage part of it. But the other side of that is that my dad pastored small churches in rural America, mostly in the Midwest. In fact, mostly in Indiana. And that was my upbringing. So I went to pastor when I was 29 years old, right when, just a couple months prior to turning 30. Ended up in East Tennessee, and it was basically like a home missions style church.
Okay.
I say home missions in the fact that we had about 15 people.
Okay.
And so I went through a lot. I mean, I went through a lot. I was bivocational. You know, going through stuff, some people say, well, going through stuff makes you better. But it can also make you bitter.
Yes, sir.
You know, if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And so, and yet I find that you don't get to where God wants you to go without going through stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was reminded, and I was reading this again this morning, and I refer to it often because it's so moving to me, but the Apostle Paul writes in 2 Corinthians, he says that when we went to Asia, I thought for sure we were going to die.
Yeah.
You know, we were going to lose our life.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he describes in one of his letters all the stuff that he went through, which got me laughing here a while back. I'm reading that Paul says that, you know, I've been whipped 5 times, you know, I've been with a whip, with a rod 3 times. I've been shipwrecked 3 times. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, if I get on a boat and it goes down, I am not getting on a boat again. I mean, like when that 747 here recently,
Yeah.
within the last year or so, lost that side panel,
Yep.
you know, and they lost 2 cell phones. And they said that they were still working when they found the cell phones. I'm like, they drop it from the air of 10,000 plus feet. You know, I dropped mine getting out of the car and it breaks. So I'm like, I don't know what in the world's up with that. But
They probably weren't Apple products.
probably not Apple. There we go. But I was getting on the plane. I asked the lady, I said, is this a 747? It was right after that had happened. I said, because if it is, I may want to walk back up the ramp. She just laughed. But he goes through all that stuff. He loses so many things and suffers so many things. And then Paul says, but this right here,
Yeah, that's right.
it was so that I would learn to stop relying on self and to rely on God.
Amen.
And he says, and now He said, God came through, and now I expect God to come through again.
Right.
Well, I'm no Apostle Paul, but I've been through some stuff, and I've learned to rely on him more than I ever have.
Yeah.
And I just expect for God to come through.
Amen.
Now, that's not always easy. It's never fun walking through some stuff. I remember T.F. Tenney said many years ago, he asked me during a transitional time in our life, and we were going through some things. He said, how are you doing? And I said, man, till date, this is the hardest thing I've ever walked through. And I don't ever want to walk through something like this again. I said, but I've learned so much. And he just started smiling. And he said, I've often said that there are some experiences I wouldn't trade for $1 million, but I wouldn't give you a penny to go back through it again.
Yeah, right.
So, just talking about going through things. We lived in the church when I was in East Tennessee, tried to help the church make its note. Just a lot of stuff. I'll skip the details, but just know that we went through a lot of things. And then I came home on a Sunday afternoon, and I was so frustrated. You may have heard me tell the story, but so frustrated. I was frustrated at my wife, the assistant pastor, his wife, all 15, 20 people we had at the time. And I'm like, nobody loves the Lord like I love the Lord. No one, cares about the church like I care about the church. No one has the vision like I have. And I was just fussing about everything. I had the Elijah syndrome,
Yeah, right.
And I'm pushing the lawnmower on a Sunday afternoon, and we had about 1.5 acres, and I was just mad. I just grabbed the mower. I don't normally ever mow on Sunday afternoon, but I just grabbed the mower, went out, and I'm just push mowing the yard. I didn't have a riding lawnmower at the time. It took me about an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes to push mow this yard. One tree in the middle of the yard, and I'm headed right at this tree. And about 20 feet away from it, I said, I don't have to be here. I don't have to do this. This is ridiculous. And therein lies one of our issues, is that when we encounter our lion's den, or we encounter the giant, or we encounter, the fire, we want to get off the altar. We want to walk away,
right.
And yet the 3 Hebrew children, they stayed with it. God showed up, and Daniel went to the lion's den. God shut them out, the lions. And I was reading the other day that when he came out, that King Nebuchadnezzar made him a great man. That's what the scripture says, and gave him great things. Yes. And sometimes we wonder, well, how does somebody get to where they're at? Well, it's because they stayed with it. They stayed in the midst of the fire.
Correct.
And so anyway, I'm pushing the mower, and I said, I don't have to be here. I don't have to do this. I could be somewhere and be full-time, and here I am, blah, 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 and I'm just fussing. And I said, all I want to do is train leaders. And when I said it, the Lord spoke to me. He said, train them. And my immediate reply was, yeah, right. Like, we only have 4 or 5 leaders to train. And then the Lord said, if you'll be faithful with a little, I will give you much. Mm-hmm. And when he said that, I lost it. I just started weeping. By that time, I was standing right in front of the tree, and I wept and wept. And I said, God, I'll do it. And that day changed my life. I went back to school, got my master's, got my doctorate in leadership, started writing books, became president of a Bible college. But I can trace it back to that moment of just going through a tough time.
Yeah.
And then God speaking to me and helping align me with where I was headed. So I was in Manila, the Philippines, 2019, and Brother Terry Schott got up to speak, and he said, I don't preach Holy Ghost crusades. That's not who I am. He said, I do leadership stuff. I train leaders. He said, I just so happen to be speaking to 252 leaders of the largest oneness organization in the world. And I'm the next speaker. And the Lord just gently reminded my spirit, I told you, if you would be faithful with a little, I would give you much. So I could go on and on. God's been good.
Amen.
God's been good.
I think that's the common thread. We've been privileged to have a number of really what I would say are influential people within I'll just say modern Christianity, in this chair that you're sitting in. And the common thread between people who are making great impacts are people that have found themselves in a similar situation as you did before your tree. And we, too oftentimes, we ask God, why am I going through this? Can you get me out of this?
Yep.
Forgetting that there was a moment prior to this that we said to God, I'll do whatever that your potential be fulfilled in my life.
Yeah.
And then we go into these moments where God says, as Job stated, right? When I'm tested, when I go through, I'm going to come forth as pure gold.
Pure gold.
But too many times when the refining moment comes, we want to skip it. But in order for us to be positioned, to be developed, we have to actually go through it. And so I appreciate your transparency with that, because truly that is, I think, a common thread in any great and impactful leader is they've been through some stuff and they realize the value of that stuff. And so,
Well, it's so true.
Thank you for that.
Well, and it's so true. I have a funny story on that. Pastoring, we're living in the church. I'm praying early in the morning, and I came to my wife, and I was so moved. I was so moved. I said, babe, I just felt led of the Lord. I said, I was praying, God, I've learned so much from the last trial that I went through. I said, God, would you send me through something else? You can imagine what my wife said. She looked at me, she goes, are you an idiot? What are you doing praying like that? She said, don't you pray? She goes, for goodness sake, Eugene, we're living in a church. And he did.
And he did. Yes, son, I will take you through something.
And he did. Not to be too dramatic, but I'm walking through the hardest thing I ever walked through my life, even right now. I have been for several years now. And I can't really talk about it, but I'm walking through one of the hardest things it is the hardest thing I've ever walked through. But I'm learning.
Amen.
I'm learning.
Amen.
And God just keeps telling me, trust me.
Yeah.
Trust me. And so I just lean on him. I think somewhere in that, if you're going to grow, you have to learn that reliance on God. You've got to move away, and this is tough, but just straight shooting. You got to move away from getting your validation and affirmation from people.
Man, right.
You've got to really, truly rely on God. And the only way to get there is to endure those moments that drive you to isolation and deeper dependency, and they're not fun. But in those moments, you really become aware of who you are and where you're lacking and how much more you need God.
Right.
And you start leaning on him. And, I've mentioned this a few times here and there, but it was an impactful moment that I was in the altar in a worship service about 2 years ago. And I remember thinking to myself, everywhere I go, somebody needs something from me. I'm at the school and I'm the guy, I'm at the church and I was serving as executive pastor, and people need something from me here. And I go out to preach or teach and someone needs something from me. And it's always, always, always like giving and helping. And I was like, God, I don't want to do that tonight. I really just want to get lost in your presence. I miss it, just you and I and nothing else. And I don't have to lead. I don't have to do anything tonight. So God, I just want to get lost in worship. And I had my hands up, and I'm in the altar. The worship team was leading the worship. It was just a God moment, to the point, out of 8 years of being there, no one that I remember has done this before or since, walked over and laid their hands on my back and was praying for me. 2 people during the worship service. And I just kept on, and all of a sudden the Lord began to speak to me in my spirit, and he says, do you know why you are where you're at right now? And I knew what he meant, why I'm TBC president, why am I speaking, why am I traveling, why am I writing books, all these things. Do you understand why you are where you're at right now? And before I could answer, he says, do you think it's because of your education? Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I know that's not it. And he goes, do you think it's because of your charisma? Do you think it's because of your personality? Do you think it's because of your connections, your networking? Do you think it's because of your last name? I'm like, God, that's not it. And it was just like a list of things. And then he says, or do you recognize that you are where you're at right now simply because I have placed my hand on your life? And when he said that to me, I'm crying. And I'm like, God, I know that's it. And then came the harsh words, but I needed to hear. He says, so if that's it, then why is it that you rely on your education? And why do you rely on your connections and your charisma? And why do you rely, and he went back through that list, He said, you can do that. And he said, all those things will take you somewhere. He said, but you'll never go where I want you to go, do what I want you to do, unless you truly rely on me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, God, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You know, because it's so easy. I mean, just be real,
Yeah,
be transparent,
real.
be practical. I can wake up in the morning and I've got enough on my plate, enough on my calendar, enough on the agenda that I can tackle it without God.
That's right.
Now, I'm not saying that, you know, I know God gives me breath and all that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that in the normal
lack of
everyday
awareness.
life, I don't have to like engage in His presence. I don't
right.
have to engage in His Word. I don't have to engage in prayer. You know, I don't have to do that. I can literally go throughout the day and make decisions and move forward. And then pull God in a little bit here and there on the side. Or I can truly rely on Him.
Yeah.
And that's the battle. Because
Yeah.
we all know, you know, at this point, you know what to do. You know how you need to make things happen. And you're a leader. Leaders
Yeah.
make things happen.
Yeah.
You know? And that's not wise to do that. But I'm just
No.
saying we can do it.
So
People run multi-billion-dollar corporations
100%.
doing that.
Yes.
I mean, we're not dumb.
Right.
We can do some things
Right.
without relying on God. But
And-
Paul said, I had to learn.
Yes, sir.
Paul said it. I have to learn. I had to learn this to stop relying on myself and rely on God.
Yeah. I shared with the church, I have a number of times, and this is one of those, I've had a number of these moments that you're not proud to share, but you realize I'm not the only person like this. And so you talking about that reminded me of, I had a moment where we live in the parsonage, and the parsonage is on the church property, and I'm walking from the parsonage over to the church on a Sunday morning, and I'm about halfway. It's not a very long walk, and I'm about halfway, and I start to have one of those conversations with the Lord, and I say, I know the minute I hit that door, I'm gonna be this for this individual. I'm gonna be the resource for this question. I'm gonna be. And the minute I get in there, I will be able to meet needs of the people that I'm privileged to lead. And I said this to God. I said, but why is it that I feel so dry? Why do I feel in all these things that I know that you're working through me, why is it I feel depleted? And it's as if the Lord just said, it's because you're doing for me, and I'm thankful, but I'd rather you were doing with me,
Wow.
not for me.
Wow.
And I know this isn't a gospel song, but I talk about...
If it's country, it's good.
Yeah, right. It's not that either. My dad used to say, if it ain't country, it ain't real music. But
My dad said the same.
I have tongue-in-cheek said, I begin to hear the words of this gospel song in that moment. Yeah. And the lyric line is, I miss my time with you. Can't get my mind off you. And the Lord said, that's how I feel about you.
Wow.
And it wrecked me in the moment. And I thought, I've got to realign what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and why I'm doing it. Because you're absolutely right. God has gifted us with so many things that we just operate in our giftings and our talents, forgetting the thing that has inspired us, motivated us. It's the thing that, refreshes us. It's actually the time we spend in His presence. And to be able to come back to that, thank you for that reminder. Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, what you just said that's powerful, man. It's so powerful.
Well, it's the reality, right?
Yeah.
It's so easy for us to lose sight.
But it's so easy to become a Martha and,
Yeah,
and not to
100%.
Mary,
Yep.
And then Steve Gallagher, I think was his name,
Yeah.
did all his research, and he said out of all of those that derailed, talking about Christian leaders, he said out of every single one of them, he said, I never met a Mary that derailed. He said every single one of them were Marthas.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that incredible?
That's crazy.
That's the whole purpose of this podcast, is to remind us that the pursuit of our lives is to gain intimacy with Christ, because when we find and we nurture and we protect
Yes.
and we make it a priority, that
Yes.
intimacy with Christ is the very thing that'll keep us centered. It'll be the very thing that keeps us on the rails, so to speak. It'll be the very thing that keeps us from falling off the precipice and forgetting, why did I do this?
Yes.
And it's not worth it anymore. But when we can be doing the same exact stuff, but when we're not doing it because we're connected and we're intimate with Christ, we're doing it just because we know it's good stuff. Ultimately, that drains us, weakens us, and then we fall in those places of failure.
So well said.
Talk to me about your books. Again, like I said, you've published 9 books. I know you're working on, for sure, one project right now, but I know you probably have 2 or 3 other projects that are sitting there.
You know me well.
But talk to me about if for our listeners, our subscribers, somebody just joining us, within this context of, man, I want my gifts to be discovered, or they are discovered. I want them to be used. But this whole concept of really that connectivity. There's a couple of your titles that are up here right now, but if you were to recommend, hey, this is one book you ought to get of my books, what one would that be?
Man, that makes it hard.
Yeah.
That makes it hard right there. So there's several.
Okay,
in light of
let's
the
pick a
subject
couple
matter.
of them.
That's what
And
I'm
you're
gonna
talking
do, 'cause
about
I can't
yourself.
Narrow it down. I can't narrow it down. So my latest book is Next Level Leader.
Mm-hmm.
So in Next Level Leader, I do talk about do but don't forsake becoming. That's chapter 4. And so there's certainly a lot of what we're talking about right now that's in that book. The Difference Maker is just straight from my heart. That's probably my favorite book. It's just straight from my heart. It's 7 key principles, and it also would cover along these kind of lines. Spiritually Healthy Leader. It's a little bit more, got a little bit more depth to it. It's a little larger book. I co-wrote that book with a friend of mine named Matthew Mullins, and that book tackles the subject of affirmation, how we chase after that rather than get it from God. So it's got some wealth of information in it. And then, of course, rodentivity. That's a word I made up. Take the rodent on a spinning wheel. He's not going anywhere, and we think we're being productive, but the truth of the matter is we're just spinning. So I took productivity, the rodent, put it together, rodentivity, and the definition of that is thinking that to be busy is to be productive, and it's not, because we're not aligned with our purpose.
Right.
And so rodentivity, most certainly. So yeah, there's 4 books. How about that?
So here's
Yes
what I
for
was,
one. I give you 4.
Get any one of those 4, get all of those 4. But the thing that I would remind each and every one of you is books on the shelf, books that are not ingested, serve really no value. They're not even worth the money you paid for the paper. But I will say this, your books, as so many other books that I have, they are rich. But again, they're rich when you ingest them and then apply the principles in your life. And so talk to me about your daily routines. That's one of the other things we talk about here a lot. And everybody's got different routines. Sometimes when we use the routines, we think it's this way every single day. I know that's not the case. Sometimes you wake up late and you don't get to do what you normally would do, or you're in a different environment, right? But talk to me about some of the routines that you have found are very beneficial, and maybe even some of them that maybe they aren't things that you do on a regular basis, but when you start to feel depleted or whatever, I got to go back to this. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Sure, that's the subject I love talking about. So first of all, I am a big picture, people-oriented person. I'm not a detailed person. I'm not task-oriented. I have that part of me that I can be, but I'm really people-oriented and big picture. So I don't like a whole lot of structure, and I don't like being confined. I don't like a box. But having said that, I can't do the things I want to do without having that structure. So through the years, I have developed and I've had help along the way with this, and I've learned from so many others, gleaned from them. But what works for me now is that I live by my calendar. So everything is time blocked in my calendar. So if you were to look at my calendar today, you would see 3 years into advance, the same thing on certain things. And I learned that if you don't put the big rocks in first, Stephen Covey's analogy, you'll never get the big rocks in. So the big rocks, of course, my daily time and devotions. Writing is a big thing to me. Writing, I don't always get to write. Sometimes it's just getting ready for the next event, and I'm studying for something or putting together materials or handouts. So basically, for me, it starts at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I get to about 5 till pushing up to about 7 o'clock. I can get 2 hours in of deep work, and then I take off to the office when school's in session. By 7:30, we're headed to the office. I get 30 minutes to clean up, out the door, and then depending on what day it is, that could go 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And I'll try, if I've got any downtime in there, that I can weave in some pockets of time. Usually on Wednesday morning, I pretty much can take another 2 hours or so. So I'll pick right back up. And then in the evening, I try to spend a little bit more time reading and just kind of take some things in. But I don't get to do that a whole lot. It's here and there, you know. So travels, of course, mess that up. So it's a constant adjustment for me right now. I'm traveling out about, I will speak close to 40 Sundays out of the year. So that means I'm traveling. The others, I have some vacations, some conferences that I'm attending that I'm not speaking at. And so it's just a lot of travels. Well, that affects, if you get on an airplane, you're coming back, it changes your structure. But I enjoy getting up early in the morning. The morning is my favorite time. In fact, yesterday, or day before yesterday, I should say, I got up at, no wait, it was yesterday. It was yesterday. I was wide awake at 2:30 in the morning. I'd gone to bed about 10:30, normally about 10:30, 11. Went to bed about 10:30. I was wide awake at 2:30. I laid there to about 3:20 something. I said, this is crazy. And I got up and went and got a hot tea and a couple other things. And then by, no later than 4, probably about 3:45 or so, I dove in. And I had a great time yesterday. I ran really well. And so, actually, it was the day before. Not that it really matters, but
Not that it really matters.
But yesterday was similar. I got up at 4:30 yesterday, and hit the ground running. The day before, I went from 2:30 and I shut it down at 10:30 at night, and I never took a break. And I was highly engaged, and I was loving it. I was loving loving what I was doing. You know, I love to write. I feel called to write. And so, actually, just a little earlier this morning, that's what I was doing. I was studying for Sunday. I was writing. I stayed up last night until about 10:15, and I was writing, producing some material that I've got to have for an event in Washington District in January. I've got to have the handouts by the first of the week, so I was putting that together. I love doing that. You know, it's a wild. It's different. So here's my goal. I look at my calendar, and my goal is to get about 70% of what I have blocked off. If I can hold myself to that calendar, because I can just blow the whole thing off every day and do what I want to do, but I will spin my wheels, I will waste time, and then I'll be in a mess. So my goal is I want 70% of what's in my calendar, time blocking, and then I know that I can pretty much operate. Now, when it gets crazy, things get busier, you know, all that, that 70% will become 90, 95. I will literally live by the calendar. and then you have to have time off too. You got to stop. So I started doing a couple things. One was that if I find myself getting tired, really wearing down, I will try to stop and take a nap. I'm a napper. I love to do that. If I can take 15 minutes,
praise the Lord,
I can get right back with it, you know. So I'll
only
try to take
15
a nap.
minutes?
I
like a 30
I can
minute
lay
nap.
down. This is no exaggeration. I can lay down, and you can put your time watch on. It's crazy. Within 11 to 13 minutes, I will snore, and I will wake myself up, and I'm ready to go. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. But I lean back in my chair a lot, throw my feet up on my desk, and I'll take about a 15-minute, and then I can feel it just starting to get
Yeah.
a little bit of a rest, and then I'll be ready to go. And I will do that usually every day, not every day, but usually every day, and that enables me to get another, several hours later. I go out usually about 2, 3 o'clock. I want a little nap, and then I'm ready to go. I may take another one at 7 o'clock, but again, they're 15 minutes.
Yeah, right.
And then I'm ready to go again until 10, and that's my norm.
I think,
It's crazy.
well,
It
but
just works for me.
yeah, but the reality is, and that's the key right there. I was just going to say that you have to learn yourself, and you have to learn where there's some things out there that if you do any study on time management or learning, your circadian rhythms and things of that nature, you find your green zones, your yellow zones, your red zones, and there's certain things you do in the green zones, and there's things you better never do in the red zone, even though sometimes we try to. But learning where those are, and then saying, I'm in a red zone, and I'm gonna take some time, and it don't have to be a lot of time, but it makes even your yellow zones so much more productive and beneficial.
So true.
So
So
anyway, I say thank you for sharing that. I'm gonna wrap this up, but I want to just say thank you for being here. So practical insights, and this will be a benefit to a lot of people. But I'm going to say, for me, that if I were to pull one takeaway out of this, it's twofold. And we're going to have another session with Dr. Wilson, and we're going to dive into something that I'm going to pull as a key takeaway out of this today. And it's number one, realizing why you do what you do. It's the Mary versus Martha syndrome, which one's more beneficial, which one's safer, and then ultimately learning there are certain rhythms to life, and you have to be aware when you've been in one of them too much, and then to take the time to refresh, whether it's spiritually, physically, etc. Because if you're not healthy, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, etc., and they all play on one another, if you're not healthy, you're really of low value to other people. And ultimately, every individual exists for the betterment of others. And I think we forget that. And so thank you for that. It's been a pleasure to have you in here today.
Thank you. I've so enjoyed this. I look forward to the next session.
Yeah, well, so again, everyone, thank you for joining with us today. Please endeavor to share this with other people. And we look forward to you being with us in the next session. But remember, everything that you're doing, it doesn't matter how other people are measuring it. It matters what you're pursuing. The goal of your pursuit matters. And so make sure that at the end of the day, what you are pursuing lasts forever. And ultimately, that's your intimacy with a God who created you. And so we thank you for being here today, and we look forward to connecting again right here on The Pursuit.